I don't really deserve the applause, but thank you very much. Good evening and welcome. It's a huge turnout for an obvious reason. We've got our good friend and man about town and national hero, Tom Johnson. I don't know how many people have bought books, but I would encourage you to buy books. Well, that's it. I'm here to sell books, Tom. I'm here to sell books. I would like to thank my wife, Duval, where are you, for working with the History Center to make this work. Thank you, Duval. And also, this is our 36th wedding anniversary. She's tolerated me for all that time, and thank you for the applause. She deserves it, for sure. Tom Johnson. He's certainly...
Be careful now.
You know, okay. Tom Johnson. Tom Johnson has indeed been a driven man. I think we all know that. He's been a workaholic. He's been a tremendous success in really in everything that he's done. I'll have to ask Edwina, later about whether that was the truth with the marriage. But he came by that determined drive, I think, through his mother. His mother, who had long hours where she worked, they lived very modestly, but she was there for Tom every step of the way. She would work 10 hours and then she'd come pick him up at the newspaper where he was, I like to say gopher, but I think Tom would call it something else. And so she instilled in him a sense of self-confidence that I think served him well his whole life. That's what moms do, right, hopefully. His dedication to his work at the Macon Tribune. Telegraph, sorry. Maybe you should, I should have an earbud here. The Macon Telegraph, which he started when you were 13, 14, as basically what they call a stringer. He would call in scores from high school games and whatnot. And he was so hardworking and so diligent and so curious that the publisher of the newspaper, when they found out what he wanted to do with his life, said, well, you know what, I'm going to make that happen. So he provided what Tom needed to go to the University of Georgia and on to Harvard Business School, which is quite remarkable and generous. Think about this. Tom, at 14, high school student, was, again, working at the Macon newspaper. 10 years later, he had graduated from high school. He had gone to the University of Georgia and done many distinctive things. He went to Harvard Business School. He met Edwina, thank goodness, and got married. And then he was one of the first White House fellows. Now that's in 10 years. How does that happen? That's amazing. I'm glad my children aren't here because they might be a little embarrassed about that. The reason Tom was such a success is that he was determined to work harder than anybody else. And he did. He worked long hours, he worked hard, he was curious, he caught the attention of people who later became mentors. And if you can just imagine this, Tom's mentors were Lyndon Johnson, Bill Moyers, who else was well, you had Otis Chandler, who was part of the ownership of the Times-Mirror. And I just don't know how you get any better than that. Tom has been very fortunate to be guided through life and his career by wonderful people who saw in him something that we all see in him. He's just an exceptional person. After being a White House fellow, Tom moved to Austin with the Johnsons. He was a respected and beloved, really, member of the family, and helped manage their personal investments in properties. After that, he was recruited to be the publisher of the Dallas Times-Herald, one of the best newspapers in the South, without question. And then he was moved along to be the publisher and president of the LA Times. Now, these are two of the most distinguished news organizations, particularly in print at that time. So Tom's leadership, his management skills, and his devotion to journalism made those operations hum. Tom, if he could say one thing about what he is in love with, other than Edwina, it's journalism, and that started early. And he's been committed to being a truth teller, being somebody that observes what happens in the world and wants to report on it. And he did that all through his career. After the LA Times, Tom had many opportunities, some very interesting opportunities to move on. But guess what? He met Ted Turner. And Ted, I think, wowed him and convinced Tom that what he needed to do if he really wanted to move ahead and have an exciting next step in his career was to come and join Ted's dream of creating a worldwide 24-hour-a-day news organization. And if you can imagine the skill that took for Tom to move in and work with Ted Turner and make that happen, is just quite remarkable. It really is quite remarkable. I think Tom was there for 13 years, and those years were years, as you may remember, the late 2000s, the late 1900s, 1990s. Yeah. Tom, you're old, but not that old. Was a time when there were significant world events that we all remember, and Tom he had a front row seat. I mean, he was not only an observer but a participant in many cases. So a lot of what we learned from that time period, we learned from Tom. Finally, I'd like to say, before I just trash this introduction here, that Tom and I really didn't bond until he finished his term at CNN. My father and mother had known Tom for years because they had been friends with President Johnson and Lady Bird. But Tom and I bonded in the early 2000s, first around the fact that we both suffered from depression. It was a family thing for me. My father had terrible struggles with depression. Tom had terrible struggles with depression, which started in Los Angeles. And Tom, like so many people, decided that he was not going to tell anybody about his depression. And instead, he was going to put up a strong front and just motor through. But Edwina was not going to stand for that. She insisted that Tom get help, which he did, and it took a while. But Tom is an example of someone who overcame his depression with the help of wonderful professionals and his own commitment and the love of his family. I also, with my depression and my father's depression, understand how difficult it is and the kind of shame that you feel when you're depressed. You really don't want people to know. Tom certainly didn't want his professional group to know, his colleagues. So when he left the Times, he had a number of job opportunities, as you can imagine. And Ted recruited him to CNN. And one of the first things that Tom told Ted was, Ted, you know I've got depression. And I think Ted turned to him and said, pal, you just don't know. So after his years at CNN, 13 years at CNN, extraordinary years, he turned his attention basically to his family. He turned his attention to his interest in how to help people with mental health problems. He just basically decided that he was going to do good. And that's what Tom's done for the last 20 plus years. He's done good. He and Edwina have welcomed a number of people into their home when they were struggling and needed a retreat. Tom has always picked up the phone when somebody's called and said, Tom, I need help. And some of you in this room have done that. Some of you have received Tom's call and said, Bill McDonald, I know Bill's here, head of the Department of Psychiatry at Emory. Tom said, Bill, you got to help this person. And what do you say to Tom? Okay, we're going to work that out. So Tom's life at this point has really been devoted to trying to focus on supporting organizations that treat those who are mentally ill, treat those who are addicted, treat those suffering from cancer and Alzheimer's. He has raised an enormous amount of money. Skyline Trail has been one of our pet projects. I won't say pet project, it's been a big project. We've raised millions of dollars to help it become the premier treatment facility in the United States. Tom helped form the Addiction Alliance at Emory in coordination with Hazelton Betty Ford, because Tom wants to help people. Tom is always open to helping people. He certainly helped me. I'm sure he's helped some of you in the audience. And before I leave the stage, I want to turn to, where are you? I want to turn to you. You know, the best thing he did was marry that lady right there. Absolutely. And he didn't think he was going to be able to do that because Pat Dye, who was a famous football player, was circling. And Tom didn't think he had, you know, what Pat had. But by golly, somehow, I guess he did. And Tom's work ethic and the move from place to place, along with his career, put a lot of stress on the family. And she hung in there with him. Again, she's the one that insisted he get help for his depression, and his life may have turned out quite differently if she had not done that. She has been the mother. She's been the caretaker. She's been the rock behind Tom, and she's basically made his life much happier than Tom would have imagined.
She is rather bossy.
I'm sorry for the intrusion there. You are bossy, but you know what? Tom often tells me, he said, you know, the thing that really makes me happy is my wife. she is somebody who is so bright and positive and buoyant, and she just makes my life so much better. And over the last 20 years, since he's moved beyond his career in media, he's appreciated that more and more. He's got 2 wonderful children who, thanks to you, and he's got wonderful grandchildren, and he's totally devoted to them and to make this period of his life a time when he really sincerely gives back to them the love that they deserve. And I think he's a wonderful person, and I'm just proud to have him as my friend. So with that, why don't I introduce Tom? You'd rather hear him anyway. So.
I have Pat Dye stories too, if you'd like to get to them tonight. I'm going to ask that our moderator come on out, and I will tell you a word or two about her. But before I do, I'd just like for us all to just pause. I know that each and every one of us is so grateful tonight for the ceasefire in Gaza and for the release of the hostages. Pat Mitchell and I go back to before the University of Georgia, but I should tell you I was part of recruiting her in a variety of ways, and over the years since the University of Georgia, I know that I have been responsible either for nominating her or securing for her the votes necessary to become the first woman president of PBS, for example. She, with Ted Turner, created Turner Original Productions. And there are others in this room who were very much a part of that. All I remember is one day Ted walked in and said, Cold War. And I said, Cold War. Anyway, Ted ordered Pat to take on the most comprehensive documentaries about the Cold War ever undertaken. And you should know that even to this day, Alma Sanders-Knott, who's here and was our chief financial officer, doesn't have a clue of how far over $50 million we went on that. But it won every award there could be. Those are just 2 examples, though. And I thought, just to put it in more human terms, I was part of a fraternity not known to being one of the most academically successful fraternities at the University of Georgia. It's called Sigma Nu. But we wanted to pick the person who was the best dancer on campus. We also wanted a person who was so successful in writing papers that she could write our papers with only hours to go before those papers would due. She went on to become a faculty member herself at the university, and many of you have followed her career, and those of you who haven't should know this is a woman who continues to be very active, particularly on behalf of women's rights. There is no stronger advocate in this country than Pat Mitchell. A couple of other things in this room. I'll just do Edwina saying keep it short. I already see keep it short. But in the room, I just ask him to stand very quickly. My editor, Sam Corden. Sam, please stand. Sam said he so enjoyed working with me for all of these years that he was never going to consider even writing or working on another book. That's the truth. Second, my executive assistant, who has been with me for 36 years. 36 years. Ashley Van Buren. And a young man, a graduate of Georgia Tech that I've mentored for at least 15 years with his career. He's here with his mom tonight. But Parrish McCall knows more about my files, my records, my most secret documents. Parrish, please stand. Parrish, where are you? Now, Pat is going to be in charge of the Q&A tonight. And I'm going to get to it, Winnow. I've already added a few words. Just to give you a moment, though. I had a girlfriend from the 9th grade to freshman at the University of Georgia. One night in the University of Georgia library, my girlfriend then, Jan Bass, said that she felt that we should get married now. And I explained that now was not a good time. I thought we might wait until after graduation. She said to me, in that case, I would like to date. That broke my heart because she married a friend of mine about 6 months later. And it was tough. But anyway, I was in an economics class. And sitting in front of me was this, I thought, breathtakingly beautiful woman. She was late to class each day. She said the reason that she was late to class each day was because it took time to get from the South Campus to the North Campus, and many of you know that's a long walk. But in any case, she came in late, and I said, gosh, you know, that's really an attractive woman. Now, I wasn't thinking so much about her grades, but that's a really attractive woman. And people said, you don't stand a chance, pal. No chance. She's the girlfriend of Pat Dye. Pat was a legendary captain of the University of Georgia football team, an All-American guard. He went on to become the head coach at Auburn. His name surrounds the stadium. But in any case, there was an opening, and so I took her out on not one but 2 dates. There was no chemistry whatever. None. And in any case, having my heart broken by the girl from Macon, Jan, I just felt like, heck, I'm not going to pursue this any further. I can't take it. So I never called her back. Several months later, she and her sorority came over to my fraternity. And as I was going out the door to work, she was coming in and she stopped and said, you are now on my blacklist. I said, why? She said, you're the only person that's never called me back. Well, in any case, it worked. And we started to, we started to date. It's been 61 mostly very happy years. And just for the benefit of you Auburn fans, and I saw several of you here tonight, sadly Pat died a couple of years ago. I told Edwina, I said, well, I'm going to Pat's services. And she said, why would you go to Pat's services? I said, I want to make damn sure that he's dead. All right, I'll turn it over to Pat. And also, there's one other person in the room, and that's William Cope Moyers. Oh, yeah. William and I have worked together a variety of ways at 2 media organizations. We worked together very much in the field of addiction. He rose to become one of the senior executives at Hazleton Betty Ford, and together we founded the Addiction Alliance of Georgia with 2 others who are in this room. Jack Harden, where is Jack? Oh, we've got, Karen, where are you? Anyway, 2 others who were fundamental to that. And I just so hope that we all continue to remember about the importance of why we're here, the importance of what we're doing. And one word on depression. Depression is a treatable illness. There are now medications, and Frank Boykin and Karen, are you still here? They, along with us, helped to found this Addiction Alliance. But depression is very much a treatable illness today. And with the new meds, new treatments, most can overcome it. So Pat Mitchell, and I apologize for the long opening, please.
I'm going to put the cards away because I'm not going to get to any of them. What a privilege it is, and a big responsibility, as everybody reminded me during the reception, to interview the great storyteller, Tom Johnson. And I think I'll start by saying that in this audience are so many people, Tom, who owe you a collective thank you for being our mentor, being our role model, being the person who recommends, who advises, who guides, who always takes phone calls, as Rex referenced. So a collective thank you.
Well, it really is more of a thank you to so many of you in this room. Gail Evans, sitting down here, read this book twice and lugged the manuscript along with her as she went over Asia. And there are others of you who have been through it. I wanted this to be an honest book. I wanted it in an era of miscommunications. I wanted to have a book that could withstand all the critics, withstand particularly the very sensitive nature of so much that's happening in America today.
Well, and I want to thank Gail for giving me a couple of clues on the questions I won't have time to ask. But I really appreciate that Rex sort of walked through the remarkable trajectory of your life. But believe me, the book is full of the kind of rich details that a great storyteller can share. So I'd love to go into detail about each and every one of them, but we'll do as much as we can. So Tom, I think I'm going to reveal something to you tonight that I don't know if you know. I had a terrible crush on you when I was 16. I think Edwina knows, so it's okay. I was, high school. I grew up 30 miles away from Tom, and he was already a legend at 16. There was this conversation going on among all the girls about this awesomely talented guy who had already gotten a full-time job at a newspaper in Macon.
He had a crush on me for my sex appeal, though.
Well, I didn't know about that part. But since you and Rex both have made the absolute deserved tribute to the extraordinary partner in your life for 61 years, I'm just going to start at the chapter 22, which is devoted to Edwina. And you've already told the wonderful story about your courtship. But I'm just wondering what you knew then. What did you see in this fabulous woman, besides being beautiful and smart, that would make her the right partner for you for all these years?
I chose a title for a chapter, the most important chapter to me in the book. I chose it because long ago I was reading, and you have to really be of a certain age group here. I was reading the Dick Tracy comics on Sunday, and there was a character in that book called Sparkle. I think Sparkle Plenty was her name, and she was this happy, vibrant person. And all of my life, since the time I first met her, I have considered Edwina to be the sparkle of my life and the sparkle of so many of our lives.
The sparkle of so many of us who know her, too. So thank you, Edwina.
And Pat and I did not have sex, just so that you know. I mean, it's... It crossed my mind.
This is classic Tom, right? Tom takes over the dinner parties at your house, so he's definitely going to try and take over this interview. But I'm going to pull it back, Tom, and ask you to think about some of the things that you observed, probably the most significant consequential events of our lifetime. And you worked for these great icons, these transformational leaders, already referenced Otis Chandler, who was publisher of the LA Times, and LBJ, of course, I'm going to come back to him, and Ted Turner. So what did you learn and observe from watching these men on the front lines of change and challenge? What did you learn about being a leader?
Until I met Ted Turner, I thought LBJ was the most complex human being I had ever met. All three wanted to win. They had a passion for winning. In the case of LBJ, he so wanted the Great Society and the programs like civil rights and voting rights and programs like Head Start and others. He wanted to make America better, far better, for particularly the poor of America. The people that he had first seen as a teacher in Cotulla, Texas, students who came to class each day without shoes and without food. He so wanted, particularly after he got the power, to use that power for good. And with the good Lord looking down, I'm telling you, he wanted it so much. Unfortunately, Vietnam was a disaster. it certainly has overshadowed in almost every way the accomplishments of the Great Society. It took me a long time to realize just how many lives we were losing and what an unbelievable commitment that Hanoi, the North Vietnamese, and the Viet Cong had to reuniting that nation. It was General Giap who told me in person with Eason Jordan, who's here sitting right beside me, that they wanted to reunite Vietnam, North and South, much like, quote, your President Lincoln wanted to reunite America. Anyway, in terms of Otis Chandler, he wanted to win at everything. In sports, he was a shot put guy who would have been qualified for the Olympics, except he busted his thumb. He loved to sail. He loved to surf. He loved weightlifting. My God, he was unbelievable in his activities, bicycling, motorcycling, high-speed auto racing, professional auto racing. I mean, I was in the car with him on one occasion when I saw that the speedometer was going over 200. It was on a racetrack, but it was going over 200. But he wanted, in every way, he wanted the Los Angeles Times to become at least as good as the New York Times. And then Ted, I said in my first meeting, I said, Ted, tell me, what is it you expect of the next president of CNN? Eason thinks I have this quote not exactly right, but I'll go with my version. He said, Tom, I want you to make CNN the best news network on the planet, pal. He rarely called me Tom. The best news network on the planet. And I said, what else, Ted? And he said, that's it. That's it. And we really worked at it for the years. And we had an extraordinary team of young people and so many of you who are in this room who made it that way. It was an exhilarating experience. And the very fact that we had Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait on day 2 of my employment at CNN helped, but also under the leadership of dozens of you who are sitting here, we were able to be prepared for that war. Ed Turner, not Ted, but Ed Turner and I went up to see Ted in a private meeting, and we heard that, after President Bush had Secretary of State James Baker negotiating with Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz of Iraq, it was clear there was an impasse. It looked as though war was ahead. We said, Ted, if you really want us and mean it for us to really own the story, we got to spend a lot of money, a lot more than budgeted. Alma wasn't in that room, but she is now. But we said, well, we think it could be $30 million more than budget. I'll never forget his words. He said, Tom, in that case, call me Tom. Tom, you spend whatever you think it takes, pal. And we put in place the necessary uplinks, the staff in the various parts of Earl Casey, who was our domestic news editor at the time, twice domestic news editor. But we went to work just to assure that we were able to carry the story when it hit. And as most of you know, when the bombs started falling, CNN was there and went live with audio throughout. So three incredible guys. LBJ in his own way, Otis Chandler in his, Ted Turner in his, and I should just tell you I was very fortunate to be part of an organization that had the kind of spirit that existed there and I hope continues.
And there's so many former CNN people and present CNN people who are here, and you must read this book. And the chapters on CNN are so rich in the details of all the stories that happened under your leadership. And I just wondered in reading it, Tom, how hard it is as an author to decide, especially with a life like yours, what you leave in and what you leave out. Are there stories about CNN that you wish you had included or didn't include?
There are stories that I wish I had included, but so far I have not come across one that I would take out. And there are a couple of stories in here that were very highly classified, and I I had to go to the CIA and to the various agencies to get the approval to use some of those episodes. And fortunately, I was able to get clearance. One of them took 27 years, and it's in the book. Even Sam Nunn questioned whether it should be cleared, but it was. And I can tell some of those if you have time. We can only go about 11 o'clock this evening.
Yeah, well, we may come back to CNN too, but when you talk about the things that, you know, you did choose to tell, and they're important in understanding a time, especially the time that you served with LBJ. There you were, a young man, the only sort of trusted outside cabinet member inside, taking notes on those Tuesday morning meetings through what LBJ himself called the most catastrophic year in the history of the U.S., with an unwinnable war, with political assassinations, riots in the streets, and then, of course, his Great Society. What did you learn and observe during those years?
Okay, I am starting at 23 in the room. And at one point, the president asked me would I become the note taker for some of the most classified meetings. And I was reluctant. I said, Mr. President, you could find somebody, young man at CIA, young man at Defense Department, State Department. And I said, you know, I am not particularly good at shorthand or anything. Well, he sent me to shorthand classes. 7 a.m. in the cabinet room, along with another White House secretary. And I learned something called speed writing, not Greg shorthand, which many of you may know, but speed writing. Mm-hmm. And I tried to start doing that. Problem was, by the next day, I couldn't even remember exactly my own notes. I mean, I do remember that a dot meant the. But I just went back to doing my notes as close in hand. And I should just tell you, I developed something I guess you would call today tunnel vision. And I'm taking these notes of these meetings and getting those notes down, turning them over to, after I typed them myself when I came back, turning them over. Connie Girard, one of the White House assistant secretaries, who was probably the most rapid typist, even almost as well as Ashley, but just extraordinary. There was only one copy. That copy went into the president's night reading. He would initial it, that he read it or ask a question about it, send it back, and it would go into a safe. None of those papers were circulated to part of the Pentagon papers at all. But I mean, I sat in the room sometime. There was one occasion listening to a proposal that might have meant the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons in order to keep a base of ours called Khe Sanh, that many of you Vietnam veterans will remember, that had been established, but perhaps the need to use tactical nuclear weapons by the United States in 1968 to keep the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese, General Giap from overrunning that base. We did not do it. President Johnson had each member of the Joint Chiefs sign a statement that we will not permit Khe Sanh from being overrun. He thought it could have been much like Dien Bien Phu had been for the French much earlier. When the French base at Dien Bien Phu had been overrun, the French pulled out of Vietnam. The French, frankly, pulled out of all of Southeast Asia. That's just one example, though, of a young man sitting in a room and taking notes. And that was one of the two that took the longest for me to get cleared.
You must have been aware that you were watching real history and real
No, I really
time.
wasn't. I've said that to to others. I mean, I'm there as a note taker. I mean, yes, I've got a Harvard degree. Yes, I've got a journalism degree. But I'm really sitting there as a note taker trying to get those GD notes just right. And because LBJ was meticulous. He had a memory. Gail worked for LBJ in the Johnson administration. There are others here. But he had a memory like a sponge in it. But the idea that we might use nuclear weapons in 1968 just scared the pants off me.
Yeah. It's really important reading for everyone who wasn't around in 1968, because it sort of makes you remember we can get through some really tough times. But what I thought would be particularly challenging for you, not only to be in that room observing and taking those notes, but you did get back, right? You were able to read the notes again.
I was, but they even now have some blotted out parts of them.
Where your shorthand failed, maybe.
Instantly. I'm so glad that all of you are not on some kind of jury judging me, because this jury would be so contaminated by people that know the secrets about me. Dr. Joe Massey sitting down here, and I go back to grammar school together in Macon, Georgia, and through high school. And anyway, so many of you here know the truth about me better than I'm able to probably tell you.
Well, let's go back to 1968 or so, when you, not only are you in that room taking notes, but you're also managing the communications with the press.
I was deputy press secretary, which is amazing. LBJ had this group every Tuesday. The President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, McNamara, the Secretary of State, Dean Rusk of Georgia, CIA Director Richard Helms, Chairman of Joint Chiefs Buzz Wheeler, National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy, and then National Security Advisor Walt Rostow, the Press Secretary. Then he added, somebody gave me a title I never used, but I was the Executive Secretary of the Tuesday Lunch. But I was really a note taker. And being paid a terrible salary, incidentally. $7,500 being paid. I had a wife and 2 children on it, and at least there was an occasion when Edwina played a major role in getting my salary doubled, and it went from $7,500. One morning, the phone rings at the White House, and Edwina answered it, and the White House says, is Tom available? The president wants to speak to him. She said, no, I'm sorry, he's not. And anyway, later, a couple hours, no, maybe an hour later, the White House called back and said, the president really does need to speak to Tom as soon as possible. And she said, well, Tom took the bus. Now, that was not uncommon. I mean, I'd leave the car at the house and take the bus. But anyway, when I got to the White House, the guard said, you go directly to the president's bedroom. Don't stop at your office. Go there. So I go over and I walk in, and the president looked at me and said, do you also bring a brown bag? And I really didn't quite. I said, no, Mr. President, I eat in a mess. Like others. But anyway, that day, my salary was doubled from $7,500 to $15,000. And the big news, President Kennedy had a huge number of White House cars, over 60. President Johnson had brought it down to 6. 6. He thought it was so much excess. I got my own White House car and driver. I'm 25 years old by then. I get my own White House car. Yeah. And let me tell you, I was the envy of all the other aides. I mean, guys like Richard Moose and all these others, they didn't have a car to pick them up and take them. Anyway, she's responsible for my raise, as she's been responsible for most of the other good decisions I've made. We have never made a big decision that we didn't make together. I made a mistake. I said, when we give away money now, let's do it. And I suggested, let's do it by a 2-0 vote. I thought that would be a good thing. Don't ever do that. She has prevented me from giving money to my Sigma Nu fraternity to rebuild the house. The house has only been damaged by the brothers about 3 times, but she is totally opposed to my. So, don't do a 2-0 vote.
Judgment, Edwina. Well, there's no question she's been just a huge influence, but so was LBJ, because not only did you serve with him in the White House, but you went back to Texas with him. And your portrait of him is a really anguished, tormented man about the war.
He was so anguished. And I have a photo of him in the book with his head down in his arms on the cabinet room table. I had been able to secure a tape that then Major Charles Robb, combat Marine in some of the worst combat areas, had sent back to his daughter Linda Robb. And Chuck was explaining the casualties his company had suffered that day. And I'm just telling you this as factually as I can. He had lost almost a third of his men. And LBJ was listening to that tape and I have finally confessed that I was the one that was able to get for President Johnson those tapes. They were really never designed for anybody but Linda. But he was so anguished, and he wanted to pursue with every possibility getting peace in Vietnam. He wrote a very personal letter to Ho Chi Minh, and Ho Chi Minh wrote back an incredibly strong no. After what you've done to our country, the way in which you've bombed our dikes, the way in which you've firebombed our people, the way in which you've destroyed our crops, on and on and on. He just wasn't able to. We thought we might have a peace right at the very end before we left office in 1969. But peace eluded him. He went to his grave still believing, however, that he did the right thing about Vietnam. He believed in the so-called domino theory that if North Vietnam and Hanoi were to take over South Vietnam, they would go all the way down the peninsula to Singapore. And the head of Singapore believed the same thing, Prime Minister, I can't remember his name, but anyway.
So Tom, what did you believe in those days? Could you
I
talk
didn't
about
know
having
what to
a
believe.
shift in your opinion?
I didn't know what to believe. I saw reports coming in from MACV, Military Assistant Command Vietnam, through General Westmoreland. General Westmoreland even spoke to Congress and said there is light at the end of the tunnel. Not long after that speech, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong overran South Vietnam. It was an unbelievable Tet offensive and just about destroyed. It took weeks just to restore the city of Hue back to command. And LBJ got on the phone with General Westmoreland. He said, Westy, what the hell? I think he used the F word. What the hell is going on? He said, you've just told the Congress that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Well, it wasn't light at the end of the tunnel. We were losing. But we saw these reports coming back from Peter Arnett, who later worked for CNN, from David Halberstam and Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather and others that were much more bleak. I mean, those reports coming back from the media, and that's why it's so important, folks, that you have trusted information. I cannot tell you.
Yeah.
And those owners of media organizations today have a responsibility to do whatever they can to try to defend the First Amendment to our Constitution, defend freedom of the press, and incidentally, it's not the reporters and editors working in these papers, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, LA Times, the reporters still wish to report accurately, in my opinion, perhaps not at Fox, but which is a different story. Incidentally, different story. Rupert Murdoch owns two entities. Fox has gone through the roof with ratings. Unbelievable. Now, when Gail and I were there, we were still in first place. But I think if we had stayed, we still would. But he owns the Wall Street Journal, and the Wall Street Journal is one of the most responsible, accurate, honest newspapers around. I mean, you can really depend on the reporting of the Wall Street Journal. You can, and in my view, the best, if you just say, Tom, okay, what's the one source of information I can go to today for trusted information? It will make some people angry. It's the New York Times. They have now the third or fourth generation of Sulzbergers, owners who care and care deeply about what they do with their media properties. They're determined to be accurate, to be fair, and not to cave to the forces that exist that are in power today. I mean, the Sulzbergers deserve incredible applause from the public of America, but somehow there's this whole left-right thing. And now I think CNN is still doing an excellent job. I think MSNBC is doing an excellent job. And the Associated Press does a spectacular job, for those of you who know. Anyway, too much.
But you do have a couple of chapters in the book compelling and somewhat frightening analysis of where we are now with all the mergers and media companies, the billionaire owners who have very partisan positions. And I'm remembering what Ted said about Rupert Murdoch. He said, they let him in this country and let him buy media companies. It's the end of free and independent media. And I think Ted was right about that. You say, you give the press 3 instructions. You say, if I were talking to the press in general, I'd tell them these 3 things you have to do. And what do we as media consumers do to ensure that we're getting the truth or that we're following the truth?
I've really condensed it to 2. Be accurate, be fair. Be accurate was my policy going back to, I was taught that on the Macon Telegraph by a crusty sports editor named Sam Glassman. Be accurate no matter what. Even the spelling of the high school quarterback's name, because those parents or grandparents are going to be looking for the accurate spelling. Be accurate. But Ted, I said, Ted, what are your policies? He said, I only have one policy, and that's to be fair. And that means if there are 2 sides or 3 sides or whatever, you try to present those sides, and that's becomes very difficult at times. We enabled Saddam Hussein to do an interview with Bernard Shaw from Baghdad to give his point of view. People say, well, that's giving the microphone to Saddam Hussein, the enemy. We on those same days are giving the microphone to the State Department, the Defense Department, the White House. And I think that there's some value in being able to look at both points of view. I mean, we've had such a tough time looking at the Palestinian point of view and the Israeli point of view. I mean, looking at now in Gaza, so my view is reporters should report. They should not do opinion. Anchors should anchor. They should not do opinion. Let's leave the opinion. Let's leave the opinion to the analysts, provided the analysts are shown clearly as being analysts. But
yeah. And yet we know, I mean, everything about the media landscape has changed, as we know, because of many of the forces that you described so well. And I know we're all concerned because democracy, our form of government, is really at stake. Would you agree with that?
Our American democracy is under attack. And unless those of us who have the power, and I don't mean the riches or the wealth, but those of us who have the power in our own professions, whether it's medicine or law or business, we have a major responsibility, in my opinion, not to cave and at the CDC, for example, not to shape science as science is to be shaped politically, for God's sakes. We should have science determining what meds we take, what vaccines we take. We should keep out of our system so much of the politicalization of things as fundamental as vaccines, for goodness sakes. I am more worried today about the state of our democracy than I've been in my 84 years. And what do? I think we each, in our own individual way, we go home and say, what can I do to resist? And I know sometimes that's really tough because by resisting, you lose your job. You lose all your income. It's a very tough world, but there are folks in this room that I know believe as I do. Many of you who stay very quiet. You're not out, waving flags at Emory, whatever. But there are so many people, and I just think that, one person still can make a difference in our society, and it can be you.
And it has been you, Tom Johnson. So I want to talk personally for a minute about something that is now what you describe as the mission of your life. during those incredibly successful years and hardworking years at the LA Times and then at CNN, none of us knew who knew you that you were suffering from acute depression.
Edwina knew, and she basically threatened me. Seriously said, unless you do something about your health, I'm out of here. And I mean, losing her would have been, you know, like losing our 2 children or grandchildren. So I did go and first saw doctors at UCLA. After three appointments, the head of psychiatry said, "Tom, you have chronic depression, and we need to deal with that." They started me on a series of meds, the first 3 of which did not work. I mean, there was one that's like taking a ball of cotton and stuffing it in my mouth, and then I had to speak. And my role is published in the LA Times. So my assistant, Joan Klunder, who worked with Ashley, I would sometimes ask her to block off my calendar so I could get under my desk and take a nap. Naps to me, I know people have various views on naps, but naps for me are like recharging the power in your cell phone. It just restores it. But in any case, along comes Ted, and I do say to Ted, before you hire me, you need to know I have depression. And his exact quote was, "Hell, pal, let me tell you about me." That was wonderful. We both were seeing the same Dr. Charles Nemiroff, the head of Emory Psychiatry. He was terrific for us. Bill McDonald holds that position today. He's in this room. Mm-hmm. But please, if you have a problem, if you don't have a partner or spouse or friend who will just absolutely force you to go, you need to go yourself, because there are meds today. There are treatments today. It took me to get to number 7 before, but I also think that I was getting really some good support out of this med and this therapy, but also I had this, maybe the most exciting job in journalism to become here as president, chief executive officer of CN. I love working with Ted. I love working with a team of people that I had there. If you're leaving, please tell me, to write later.
We have to wrap it up soon, but I want you to tell quickly that in many ways your battle with depression and finding the right solutions was helped by what you call the Blues Brothers.
Yes.
Not the band.
Beth Finnerty's here. Beth is probably the finest leader of any not-for-profit that I've ever known in any city. Skyland Trail is the #1 center of its type, as named by the American Psychiatric Association, not by us. And if you have depression, or if you have anxiety problems, or if you have many others, I think try to get evaluated at Skyland Trail, be treated at Skyland Trail. And those who are connected with Skyland Trail, Rand Glenhagen is in this room. Rand and I and Rex, we wanted to build an adolescent mental health center. We were doing adults and we were doing middle adults. So Rand and Rex and I go out. We went to a couple places and said, "Sorry, that's just not on our agenda." And before we left, I can remember one said, before we left, said, "Tom, we want to start contributing annually to Skyland Trail. And how does it start at $30,000 right now?" And this was a company that absolutely would, but I think that we wanted to raise about $15 million for what is now the J. Rex Fuqua Adolescent Mental Health Center at Skyland Trail. We needed to raise $15 million. I think we raised $25 million. And Beth can tell you, there were days when she first started it when she couldn't raise $50,000 when it was first started. You want to say anything about that, Beth?
We're going to, as everything Tom says, is.
Hope.
But, yeah.
And the difference in it went for scholarships and financial aid programs, and if you haven't had a chance to visit, but also, that's one example. Look, Skyland Trail is not the only one in the country that does good work. William Cope Moyer is here. What they do at Hazleton on addiction is probably just the finest you could possibly. They merged with Betty Ford, and now we have this new center here in Atlanta, the Addiction Center. in Atlanta, but we can all do our part. And I must tell you, I try to do it as anonymously as possible.
But you do
I don't
it,
need any
Tom.
more plaques. I don't need any more honors. I don't need to be philanthropists of the years that Rex and I have both been. But I just want us, in my lifetime, I want my 8th inning not to be about my golf handicap, but what can I genuinely go to the grave thinking I've helped to make the world just a little bit better.
Yeah.
And we can. So, Rand, I'm ready to do it again.
And I'd love to continue this interview for much longer, but Tom, let me just say that you have been driven and you continue to be, but you have also been dedicated to making the world a better place. And it is a better place, and this is a better community because we know you and you live in it, and you share your life with us.
But one last thing I want to say, one last thing I say. There are so many young people out there today that need a mentor. I mentioned Parrish. His mother's here tonight, but I took on Parrish, and I have seen the progress that he's made. There are so many young people that need one of you, to reach out and just give them a help. I heard this song played up on Lake Burton one Sunday morning called "Throw Out the Lifeline," and I try to get people, maybe while you're going home tonight, just to listen to that song. Basically, what it says is there are people out there drowning, and they need somebody, somebody to throw out a lifeline, pull them ashore as best they can. Who is it that sings it?
Well, many do, but you have been that lifeline to so many people in this room and many other places. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for all that each of you, just your presence tonight. Thank you for this, and I really do hope that that we all will continue sort of tonight to consider what each of us can do, and not just in wealth, but in what we can individually do. Edwin has also given me the signal about 5 times. And Duval, Rex, thank you very much for underwriting this whole night, and thank you for making Rex a happier guy.